The movie is based on a true story. At the trial, David Marks testifies. The judge is interested in the defendant's past, who as a child witnessed the loss of his mother. This left an imprint on David for the rest of his life. Further events take us to New York, in 1971. Young David Marks is the son of a very influential man who once met a simple girl named Katie. The girl had recently moved from Long Island, where she lived with her mother. Katie immediately attracted David's attention, so he decided to invite her to a social party. The father was unhappy that his son as always was late. The most influential people in New York were gathered here. Sanford Marks introduced his son to all the guests. Katie, dressed in a simple dress, stood out among all these socialite ladies. It was time for toasts. Sanford Marks was a real estate tycoon who amassed a huge fortune. David and Katie escaped from the party. David shared his plans to open a health food store. Katie in turn revealed that she wanted to attend medical school, but the father's passing changed her plans. Since then, the young people have been inseparable. Against the father's wishes, David didn't stay in New York and moved to Vermont with Katie, where they opened a health food store, just as David had dreamed. The store was named All Good Things. It seemed like happiness. Sanford didn't oppose the son's relationship with Katie, although she would never be one of them. But what truly upset Sanford was the fact that his son rejected a career in real estate. Katie began to notice that David often talked to himself. But at first Katie didn't think much of it. David and Katie spent the holidays with her family. No one expected that they would ever sit at the same table with someone from the Marks family. For David, it was unusual that during dinner, everyone conversed so casually with each other. In his world, everything was very different. That night he proposed to Katie. The girl didn't expect it, but of course she agreed. Soon the couple got married. Both Katie's parents and Sanford were present at the modest wedding. The year 1972 arrived. Sanford still held out hope to convince the elder son to continue his business, but David was happy here, away from everyone. Sanford told his son that Katie deserved better. Surely, she dreamt of something else when she left Mineola. David is now being provided for by his father because the store is not making much profit yet. Sanford left, leaving his son in contemplation. Soon David sold the house, and as his father wanted, began working for the company owned by their family. David's new life does not bring him joy. He has no desire to deal with real estate. Sanford on the contrary is glad that his son is here. Primarily, David was involved in leasing and accounting at Marks' organization. The company has many competitors who tried to act through the mayor. David and Katie now live in a luxurious apartment. This is the life Katie always dreamed of. Once she asked her husband if he ever thought about children. David said he did not want that. Katie clearly didn't expect to hear this and thought something was wrong with her husband. However, the issue was not physical but rather in David's mental health. Katie again heard her husband talking to himself, repeating their recent conversation. In public, David creates the impression of being a perfectly sane person who loves his wife. Katie still wants to study medicine. At a party, she learned from Deborah Lehrman, a close friend of David's, that as a child he witnessed his mother voluntarily pass away. Since then, David's been weird. Katie knew nothing about this. Later Deborah, who knows David his whole life, had dinner with him. Of course, like everyone else, she wondered if David and Katie planned on having children. David avoided the question. Deborah advised him to see the good therapist who uses unconventional treatment methods. David thought it was a good idea. The methods were indeed unconventional. Under the doctor's guidance, David shouted loudly, releasing his emotions. One day, Katie decided to check the husband's case, which contained something compromising related to his family's company. David realizes he's not made for life in New York, but he endured it because Katie liked it here. They even bought a country house by a lake. The couple threw a party where aside from friends, relatives and business partners, neighbors also attended. Tired of the noise, Katie spoke privately with a pregnant neighbor. Katie admitted that she too was expecting a baby. No one else knew about it yet. After the party, Katie told her husband about the pregnancy. She didn't need a house in New York, a country cottage, or a beautiful life. She just wanted a real family. Seeing the husband's reaction, Katie promised that things would be different from his childhood. Hearing this, David became furious. Katie was genuinely scared, but she decided to have an honest conversation with him. David said he wasn't the person she wanted him to be. David was willing to do anything for his wife except one thing. These words made Katie cry. David planned to take Katie to a clinic to address the issue, but his plans changed because his father urgently summoned him to work. Their competitors had begun to take action. Katie went to the clinic alone. She longed more than anything to become a mother, but it seemed that it wasn't meant to happen in her marriage with David. Afterward, Katie could barely hold herself together. She felt terrible both emotionally and physically. Noticing Katie's condition, David's friend's wife Lauren Fleck offered her substances. Katie had never done this before, but now she needed to forget herself. During another social party, Katie seemed relaxed, but it didn't mean she forgot her sorrow. In the next scenes, someone stopping at the bridge at night is seen dragging garbage bags out of the car. After some time, Katie began attending medical school. She had already applied to college but hadn't told her husband yet. It was 1978. David saw a letter from Albert Einstein Medical College. Upon learning that she had been accepted, Katie was happy, but something overshadowed the situation. The husband became increasingly distant from her, absorbed in himself. Katie felt very lonely in this house. But perhaps the upcoming studies would be beneficial for her. The family is very proud of Katie, who dreams of becoming a pediatrician. Now she's closer to the dream than ever before. David, who looked nervous, said it was time to leave. However, Katie didn't intend to go anywhere. Family meetings are her only outlet, so she wanted to stay here for a few more hours. David, barely in control of himself, calmly said he would wait in the car. However, a minute later, he burst into the house and grabbed his wife in front of her parents and brother. Katie intends to leave her husband. David tried to convince her not to, as she'd be left without means of livelihood. Katie is confused. She loves her husband but doesn't really know him. Ultimately, Katie decided to stay until she figured out what to do. The next day, she found her cards blocked. After consulting with a lawyer, Katie learned that her husband receives all funds from various trusts, meaning he essentially has no money of his own. Therefore, in the event of a divorce, Katie would get nothing. The lawyer advised Katie to find a way to influence her husband. This was the only way she could expect compensation. At dinner, Katie tried to act as if nothing had happened. She didn't want the husband to guess what she was planning. In the middle of the night, Katie ran straight through the window to the neighbors, saying she was afraid to be at home. The neighbors were going to call the police, but Katie asked them not to. Later, David calmly explained that they just had an argument. To avoid making matters worse, Katie returned home. Her life had turned into a nightmare. But she was determined to act and once visited David's office to find dirt related to the company's financial activities. David was already returning. However, Katie managed to find what she needed and escaped. Of course, she left traces behind. Katie knows that the most challenging part lies ahead. Now she has to blackmail her own husband to get a divorce and not end up with nothing. Some time later, a senator received a package containing a notebook with all the compromising information. However, the mayor ordered it to be sent back because the Marks family's domestic issues were not their concern. Certainly, Sanford soon found out about it. He knows that his son is a weak person because he doesn't control the situation at work or at home. That's why Sanford made the decision to pass control of Mark's organization not to David but to his younger brother, Daniel. Although David didn't show it, he was glad. He never wanted to become the head of their company. 10 years of marriage are behind Katie. Now she wants to continue living without David and take care of herself. However, at night, while at her parents' house, she couldn't hold back and tearfully called David. He begged her to return home, promising that things would be different from now on. In the middle of the night, Katie left the parents' home and intended to drive drunk. The brother tried to stop her, but Katie left anyway. The neighbors saw Katie return late. It was raining hard. David was already waiting for his wife and suggested having dinner. During the dinner, David was silent. Unable to bear the tension, Katie left the table. The husband followed her. The neighbor couldn't sleep. Looking out the window, she saw something happening in the Marks shed. Early in the morning, David met with his father at their old house. David initiated this meeting. He misses his mother greatly, believing that his father bears responsibility for what happened to her. Sanford told the son that his mother was very ill. But David disagreed, because it wasn't always like that. He kept asking his father why he let him see it and didn't take him into the house that day. Sanford couldn't listen to this anymore and wanted to leave, but the son didn't allow it. Then Sanford confessed that he thought if his wife saw that their son was downstairs, she wouldn't take a step off the roof. Sanford was going to bed and advised the son to go back home to his wife. David said she's no longer there. Now he is just like his father. Understanding that the worst has happened, Sanford tried to get an explanation from his son, but David simply left. In the present, David is testifying in court. According to him, on the eve of Katie's disappearance, they were at the lake house. Then Katie took a train to the city, and David hadn't seen her since. It was 1982. However, according to witnesses, Katie was seen later the same evening at their city apartment. Also, a doorman claimed to have seen her making a call and getting into a taxi the next morning. The police took the disappearance of Katie seriously. David was not among the suspects. The Marks family offered a $15,000 reward for any information on Katie's whereabouts. Katie's family was devastated and tried to find her on their own. However, These searches led to nothing. In the year 2000, almost 20 years later, the investigation into the disappearance of Catherine Marks was reopened. Thanks to new forensic methods, including DNA analysis, many crimes can be solved. According to David, the district attorney decided to reopen the case solely for their political career. This was being talked about everywhere. In court, David admitted that due to the publicity, he decided to change his appearance and move to Texas. He wanted to stop being David Marks, so he lived there under the guise of an elderly woman. It was then that David met Melvern Bump. To avoid giving himself away, David pretended to be mute. News showed the lake house where the couple once lived. Recently, Deborah Lehrman published a new crime novel whose plot coincided with the circumstances of Katie's disappearance. As such, investigators tried to contact David, but currently, no one knows where he is. One day, David received a message from Deborah, who didn't expect things to turn out this way. Deborah would like to be with David now, but her life has many problems, including financial ones. She hopes David won't refuse to help her. David continues to live in his disguise. He regularly receives voice messages from Deborah but ignores it. David and Malvern became good friends. David no longer tried to pretend, but this did not bother Malvern at all. David also made no secret of the fact that he arranged all this because he needed to disappear. Malvern was in a similar situation. For his own reasons, he disappeared many years ago and settled here, where no one would find him. David planned to buy a house. Since Malvern was being evicted from his apartment, he hoped that David would help him. David felt very awkward. Deborah is still trying to reach David, but in vain. She threatens to tell everything if he doesn't show up. One day, Deborah saw a car near her house and assumed it was David. But in reality it was Malvern, who broke into her house and took her life. Malvern hoped that David would be grateful to him for it. The news was talking about the strange circumstances of Deborah Lehrman's death, whom the district attorney was going to question about Katie. Sanford saw this on TV. He was already very old and feeble. The story of Katie's disappearance made influential people nervous again. David stopped answering Malvern's calls, who realized that the friend had deceived him. In reality, David had no intention of buying a house to live with him. One day returning home, David discovered that Malvern had been evicted. Now, Malvern was at David's apartment and behaving as if he were at home. A fight broke out between the men. In the end, David took Malvern's life, but according to him, it was self-defense that led to an unfortunate accident. Malvern's gun accidentally went off. David didn't call the police because he knew no one would believe him because of his past. That's why he got rid of the evidence by throwing it into the river. In court, David denied his involvement in what happened to Deborah, as well as Katie's disappearance. However, in the past, his father was close to solving it when he suspected that his son had left Katie lifeless in the trunk of her own car. But no one ever found out if that was true. Then, a voiceover narrates that David Marks' testimony in the Malvern Bamp case convinced the jury it was self-defense. No charges were ever brought in Deborah Lehrman's case. Shortly before Sanford Marks's passing, David visited his father one last time. Katie Marks is still considered missing. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.